What's up, guys? Welcome back to The Question, where you have the questions and I have the answers. And today I'm going to be comparing Lucifer, the comic book series, to Lucifer, the TV show. But before we get started, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. I try to put out videos every Wednesday about whatever comes to mind. Recently I've been doing a lot more fan nerdy video essay content. In the past, my asexual videos have been very popular. If you want me to cover a specific topic, please comment below. Also, please follow me on TikTok. I am way more active on there. I do regular quote book Monday of all the weird things that me and my friends and my family say, as well as slightly more condensed historical lessons and commentary every Friday. The link to my TikTok will be in the description below. So without further ado, let's get on to the video. So if you were there for my last video, which not many of you were, I have been reading the Lucifer comic book series. Last summer I also watched the Lucifer TV show, and my brother was like, you should do a compare and contrast on these different forms of media because holy fuck, are they not the same at all. The Lucifer comic book series is a spin-off from Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. This is not written by Neil Gaiman though. Lucifer comic book series is written entirely by Mike Carey. There are 11 volumes, I think like 74 editions. And yeah, it basically continues once Lucifer leaves hell, what he does afterwards, and essentially he continues his grievances with God. He creates his own universe, which doesn't turn out well, and eventually the entire universe is reset once God goes up and quits, and then Lucifer just leaves all of creation, finally getting the freedom which he has longed for his entire life, just outside of any control of anyone. And I'm pretty sure just it's implied he just merges with the void outside of creation. So we're getting a lot of there's freedom in death kind of vibes. So that's the comic book series. The television series first aired on Fox, and then once it was canceled, it was picked up again by Netflix, which means, of course, you know it has to have a dance number musical episode, because all Netflix original series do when Netflix was first putting out original series. I don't know why that is, but Riverdale has it, Lucifer has it, The Magicians had it. Also, because it is a cop show, yes, it's a cop show, they turned Lucifer into a cop rom-com series. They had to have a furry episode because every cop show has a furry episode. Lucifer, NCIS, another one I can't remember because I don't regularly watch cop shows, but it's something that comes up a lot. I don't know why. Anyway, overall thoughts and opinions on Lucifer comic book series. I thought it was really good. I like the way that it explored and really branched out into how the lore building and universe worked, as you saw from my last video. Unless you didn't, you should go watch it. I liked how it continued mostly that trend of like, if you believe in everything, then anything exists. I didn't like in the last 3 volumes that it took a hard turn into Christianity. Once God left, it became the, oh my God, everything is going to fall apart because God's not there. And instead of being like, oh, well, it's only happening because you believe it, no, it was just like, actually the only true thing is the Christian God, and everything else kind of doesn't matter. And then the new God purged all of the other mythologies and deities, so now it's just the Christian God that has control over the universe. And I didn't fuck with that. As a religious studies major and a non-Christian myself, that felt wrong to me. And I don't think Neil Gaiman would have included that, but I don't know much about Mike Carey as an author. But it was a choice, and now it's done. So I think in total I would give it a 7 out of 10, just for that hard Christian tone at the end. As for the Lucifer TV show, I didn't like it. I didn't like it just because it did horrible things to religion. Not in the same way that the Lucifer comic book series took a hard turn to Christianity. If anything, it just did like random things to Christian lore, like existing Christian lore, which I didn't like. And also just The relationships weren't well written. They had a lot of very not good takes about emotional maturity in relationships that I couldn't jive with. Of course, they had that random musical episode. And just in between seasons didn't flow as well, I thought, in my opinion. So I thought overall writing and just consistency of a show wasn't good. And then they did the whole Hail Mary time stuff at the end where he had his daughter. Then it's like, well, you have to abandon her in order for her to love you in the future. And it's like a whole weird thing that I just didn't like. And then they ended the show with Welcome to the Black Parade, specifically so they could use the line, become the savior of the broken and the damned, because he becomes hell's therapist. That's how the show ends, is he decides that his purpose in life is to return to hell, to become a therapist for all of the damned so that they can be reformed and go to heaven. Which is a take. So clearly very different media. Okay, but let's really get into it. So first of all, Lucifer in the show undergoes this great change of, like, he's the devil, but he doesn't really want to be the devil anymore. He hates how humanity attributes all the negative things in the world to him. And, you know, he has a really great line of, like, they assume that I'm the one, you know, getting them to go and commit sin, that I'm the one on their shoulder convincing them, even though I don't even go up to earth, you know, and then they blame me for the fact that they're being tortured when they're only here because they believe that they're supposed to be here. And that is a direct quote from the comics, which I like. However, it's not a direct quote from the Lucifer comics. It's a direct quote from the Sandman comics when he justifies leaving hell in the first place. Either way, it's still a great quote, and I love that it is taken from the original comics. However, Lucifer in the Lucifer comic book series does not undergo a great change. He is a dick. He does not care about anybody except for himself, and he never changes. And if anything, that is a very hilarious point in the series, because this whole time everybody keeps expecting him to be a better person than he is, or to have, like, grown as a person through any of these experiences, and he just doesn't. He just continuously is an asshole and repeatedly states throughout the entire thing that the only reason he is helping anybody is because what they're doing is affecting him or will benefit him in some way. He does not give a shit about any single person in this entire series. He does not give a shit about even the people closest to him who are really trying to help him, like Mazikeen, eventually abandoning her, having never returned any of her affections or love. And even though his actions have consequences and kind of were the instigating point to a lot of the events and the destruction of the universe, he never once feels like any of it is his fault. Because he was like, if people just left me alone, none of this would have happened. And it's like, yes, but also you understand why they didn't. And so that's a very different point. Also because, as we can see here, he is drawn to look like David Bowie. That was a very specific thing that Neil Gaiman did, is he was like, no matter what, Lucifer has to look like David Bowie, and Tom Ellis is not David Bowie. Also, it's important to note that all angels are asexual. They're asexual beings. They do not have genitals. They do not have reproductive cycles. And so I think it's really funny that they portray Lucifer in the TV series and in general as, like, this very sinful, indulgent, sexual character when he doesn't. And they only show him having sex, like, twice. And even then, it's not because he wants to, it's just because somebody really wants to have sex with him, and he's like, oh, sure, whatever, like, it's a transaction. All angels are this way, except for one who canonically did have sex with Lilith. He was down bad for Lilith, and that resulted in his death because angels are not supposed to be down bad for anybody. That being said, something that's never addressed in the comic book series is that angels can have sex despite not having genitals. And this comes up a lot in the series, to the point where even in universe they're like, how does that work? Because we all know that there's no genitalia down there. So what is happening? How is sex working? And they never answer it. But even in universe they're like, this makes no sense. And yeah, it doesn't make sense. So Mike Carey, please explain yourself. Why do these asexual angels need to be having What did this add to the plot? Please explain. I'm very confused. So since I mentioned Lilith, I will start with Lilith next. For those of you who don't know, Lilith is a character from Judaic lore, not Christian lore, just Judaic lore. She is not mentioned in the Torah or the Bible. However, she came about the similar way that we decided there is layers of heaven, and that there is a war between good and evil, which cast Lucifer out and into hell. Someone came up with it and it just became really popular. Basically, a scholar, stated that there was a contradiction in the book of Genesis, stating that, they said that God made man and woman, and then, at the same time, and then it goes on to say that, but, Eve came second from Adam, so there must have been a first wife that was there before Eve, and so Lilith was born, and she was cast out of the Garden of Eden because when they were having sex, she wanted to be on equal terms. She didn't want to be topped. She wanted either to top or for them to do it in some way that denounced gender inequality. And God and Adam were like, no, get the fuck out of here. She left. She had sex with an angel and then was cursed to never have kids, and any children she may have be like demons. So hell is populated with her children, which are since known as the Lilim. They're the first demons, and in some stories she becomes a snake, which then later gets Eve to eat the apple, but that is a less known take. So anyway, that's Lilith, and she appears in both the comic series and the TV show. In the TV show there are two Liliths, which was really weird and confusing and never addressed again. In the Fox series, Lilith is God's wife, who is cast out of heaven after their divine divorce. She comes back, she is Hell's first prisoner, or at least Hell's most important prisoner, and she is used as a way for Lucifer to begin reconciling his hard feelings about being cast out from heaven with his family, and that later goes through with his siblings, his mother, and God finally. And eventually with himself, and this growth and processing of trauma, and therapy is a large theme, hence why he's going to a therapist and later decides to become Hell's therapist, because people just need to work on their problems to become better people. And eventually she falls in love with Dan, who is mainly a character there for comedy. That's Chloe Decker's ex-husband. And it is just very comedic, the fact that they fall in love with each other. Eventually she does get her own universe. Lucifer cuts open a portal into the void and throws her in, and she's able to create her own universe outside of God's creation. And this mirrors some of the events in the Lucifer comic book series. Obviously, Lilith, nowhere else out of this Fox series is Lilith ever God's wife. There is speculation that certain pre-Christian texts denote that God did have a wife. However, that's not widely known, but Lilith was not it. And obviously in the comic book series, Lucifer is the one who opens a void and creates his own universe, not Lilith, though Lilith is found hiding in it. In the TV show, in the Netflix series, there is a second Lilith, and this is closer to the biblical character Lilith. However, she is only there in a flashback, which we don't know if the flashback is true or not. Eventually, Mazikeen goes on a quest to find her mother, just to find out that she gave up her immortality and died of old age. So she's never really a main character or a really important character in the TV series. She is an important character in the comic book series, though. As I said, she's hiding out in Lucifer's universe, and when the world starts to cave in on itself with the absence of God, she decides to wage war against the host of heaven, because in this series, the Lilim built the Silver City, which is where all the angels and God reside, but of course they are barred from it because they are demons. So she decides to wage war, also because her angel lover died, and she wants revenge for that as well. I don't really like the way that Lilith is portrayed, mainly because she is always portrayed as a very hypersexual, seductive, evil person, which makes sense because a lot of her mythology revolves around sex. She's kicked out for wanting to be more equal in sex. She later has sex with an angel, and then everything about her has to do with fertility and motherhood. However, I think that it's still a really weird dynamic that we make her like very hypersexual and seductive, and like that's her main character trait, and not really her like anger or vengeance. It's still this like she contains power, but it's through this motherhood and nurturing and seductive sexiness. Or like they also made it canon in the comic series that she can be impregnated by anything. So like she has sex with an angel, and we all know that angels don't have genitalia, they can't reproduce. But she gets impregnated anyway because she's like, oh yes, this is something I can do. Anything that I have sex with, I can impregnate me. And that's like a really weird thing to say and to note. And so I just that's, I'm gonna leave that with you. Other characters that are both in the comic book series and in the TV show is Amenadiel and Mazikeen. Amenadiel is the main antagonist for the first few seasons. He is trying to bring Lucifer back to hell because like hell is disorderly, someone else needs to run it. In the comic book series, that is not the case. God tells Uremiel and Duma, who are two other angels, to go and run hell, and they do so with varying degrees of success. Amenadiel's main beef with Lucifer in the comic book series is that he just hates Lucifer. All of the angels hate Lucifer. And now that he is doing things not the way that God intended, even though we actually find out that God intended for all of this to happen, because God is like a control freak parent and just wanted to see the world fall apart. He got bored, and so he was like, what if I just dipped out and left everything a mess for everybody else to figure out? And then they failed, essentially. But no, so he blames everything falling apart on Lucifer, and so he decides to wage war on Lucifer, which does not go well. They lose. So he decides to challenge Lucifer to a duel, and then he dies, and Lucifer eats his heart because the only way to kill an angel is to eat their heart, I guess. So yeah, Amenadiel is also not as hot as the show makes him seem. He's a disgusting little frog of a man who is just the worst. In the show, Amenadiel, who I still think is the worst character in my opinion, does undergo a change. He becomes human for a season. He has to really think of like who he is and where his loyalties lie and what his beliefs are outside of his duty as an angel. He becomes a father, and eventually he and Lucifer reconcile and become a united front, and it's really, really wholesome. And I do like Amenadiel near like the last 2 seasons of Lucifer. Just for the most of it, I did not like him. Also because he really just used Mazikeen for sex and to get information on Lucifer, and that's never really addressed, and he never really apologizes for that or recognizes that what he did was wrong, and instead the entire show just like makes it seem like Mazikeen is being crazy emotional and like overbearing for being hurt that her friend and her ex basically are having sex in a relationship, because yeah, that I would be upset about that too. Most people would be upset by that. But no, we made it seem like she was crazy for being upset by that. Anyway, Mazikeen. Mazikeen is also in the show and in the comic book series, and fun fact, the actress who played Mazikeen in the show is the only person in the entire series who has actually read the comics and is a huge fan of them. So a lot of her outfits come from the comic book series. A lot of her lines and scenes are taken from the comic book series because she insisted upon them. However, just because the plot is very different, she is very different. In the comic book series, Mazikeen is entirely loyal to Lucifer. She's in love with Lucifer. She is devoted to him to the end of her life and to the end of the universe, and she would do anything to him. And even though he greatly mistreats her, he strings her along just so he can use her because she is an incredible fighter, very smart, very determined, almost indestructible. he never actually returns that affection. It's stated that they do have sex, that they consider them like a married union. The rest of hell considers her like a concubine of Lucifer's because, yeah, there is no love there and she just does whatever he says. And he really doesn't care about her because the amount of times that he has abandoned her for dead in the comic book series is like, man, please have a backbone and leave this man. You can do so much better. And we see that a lot in the beginning as well of the series, but eventually Mazikeen does grow and become her own person, which I do like. I do genuinely like that. Mazikeen was my favorite character of the entire series. She's a badass. She's great. She is a bisexual icon. She is still a bisexual icon in the comics. In the comics, she does canonically have a girlfriend. Her name is Beatrice, and they are incredible together. I will try and find a picture of this scene, but essentially the best scene ever is they are in heaven, and of course Mazikeen is not supposed to be in heaven because she is a demon, and not only that, she's queer, which heaven is also not down with, and they're like, okay, ma'am, you need to get the fuck out of here. Like, you saved all of our asses, but you need to get the fuck out. And she and Beatrice are there, and she's like, Beatrice, you know, passion is blasphemy in this holy place, and I feel a great need to blaspheme. And it's just her kissing Beatrice while flipping off all of the angels, and it is the best thing ever, and I stand by that. So yes, both gay. Beatrice is not a character in the TV series, which is very sad. Instead, they pair Mazikeen with Eve. Eve is not a character in the comic book series. She is in Sandman, but she's not in Lucifer. But I'm just glad that they let her be gay and everywhere, because yes, please give people gay rights. Now, characters that weren't in the comic book series. Chloe Decker, Dan, Ella Lopez, the therapist whose name I cannot remember. Any human character was not in the comic book series. They exist because this is a cop rom-com, and because therapy and growth are the big underlying themes of the TV show. So they exist to do that. And they're fine. I liked the therapist. I thought it was so wild that, like, she's just out here committing crimes, breaking HIPAA. But she was great. I loved her. I didn't like that she was with the Menadil. I don't like most of the ships in this show. I didn't like Chloe and Lucifer, mainly because it seemed like they were going to get together at every single season, and then some really trivial thing just kept them apart. And it's like, cool, the first few times it's believable, but now after you do this every single season, I'm not buying it anymore, you know? I loved Ella. I loved her so much. I loved she was struggling with her faith. Dan, I felt they did really dirty. I thought he was a great character. He had a lot of potential, but they really just played him as a comedic character and didn't really give him much else most of the time, which was really sad. I also loved him and Mazikeen and their dynamic together as characters, and I wish we got to see more of that, but we didn't, which sucks. Now, for characters that were in the comic book series that were not in the TV show, we have Elaine Belloc, Rachel Begay, Jill Presto, and I believe that's it. Oh yes, and Solomon. So Elaine Belloc is the daughter of the Archangel Michael. Michael is the only character that can actually, the only angel that can reproduce, because he has special powers that allows that. He's supposed to be the one to take over as the next god, but he threw a temper tantrum and decided not to. I shit you not, that's what happened. He threw a temper tantrum and decided not to. So then Elaine becomes the new god, and I love Elaine as a character. She's like this child. I think she's 14 when it starts, and by the end she's like 16 or 18, I don't know. But she starts out as just like a schoolgirl who can talk to ghosts, and she's solving murders because she can talk to ghosts. And then it's like, oh, you're an angel, and then she dies, and then she doesn't actually die. And then she's made god of Lucifer's universe, and then she's made god of the entire universe, and she's just great. I don't like her decision, though, to erase all of the other deities and other mythologies, because I just don't agree with that decision in general. She also makes the decision to manipulate Jill Presto, which I'll get into later, which I also just find really icky. I'll get into it now. Jill Presto is a human character. She's a cabaret dancer. who really just, she's like the Dan, except it's less comedic and more just nothing good happens to this woman whatsoever. And she just exists to take on all of this misery, and we never really recognize it, which sucks. She is possessed by these sentient playing cards who have all of the power of the endless destiny, and they want to create their own universe as well. They want to be in charge of everything. And so they make her do all of their bidding, and eventually they rape her so that she will give birth to their physical form. And so her quest is to get a cosmic abortion, which she doesn't succeed in doing. And instead of helping her, Elaine and Lucifer basically erase her memory of being raped and instead make it seem like she had a passionate light with her lover, and just like neutralize the powers of the tarot cards so that it's just a regular baby. And that just seems so icky to me. That's such a slimy, underhanded thing to do. And I feel like she didn't deserve that. So yeah, I really feel like she got the worst hand of the stick there, because she had to endure all of that, and now she doesn't even, like, because of no fault of her own, she's like manipulated into not even remembering it, and then not getting her old life back, but instead being stuck with another life, which she also didn't want. But now she's forced to think that she did want it. Rachel Bad Guy is a Navajo girl who was also manipulated by Lucifer in order for him to meet his own ends. He needed someone who believed in Navajo mythology in order to get to certain deities which are specific to the Navajo traditions, and basically used her in order to get there, and then kind of abandoned her there. But then she became not a shaman, but she started working with her grandfather who was a shaman, and then was like really, really powerful, and I love her so much, and I really wish we did get to see her in the Lucifer TV show, because one, representation, there are like 3 people of color in the entire TV series. It just wasn't there. So yeah, basically a lot of badass women that were just cut out. Which, I mean, also it makes sense, because that's just not what the TV series was doing. It's a cop rom-com about morality, not whatever the Lucifer comic book series was. Finally, the big one, God. How do they handle God? Because God becomes a tangible character in both the comic book series and the TV series. And both times, so I think it's kind of a mistake. However, they're portrayed in drastically different ways. And I understand why. TV is going to reach a larger audience than a comic book series is, especially a spin-off comic book series. And the way that they handled it, it's a mainstream propaganda rom-com on Fox. It's going to reach a lot more people than this comic series ever did. So there's not as much they can do with the portrayal of God to make him a more nuanced character. He is seen as like a silly old man who just wants to spend time with his kids in his aging years. At some point it's like if anything, he has like divine dementia, and so he shouldn't have use of his powers anymore because he's not using them well. He decides later to retire with his wife, Lilith, whom he reconciles with, and just fucks off from this universe into a different one. And now it's a scramble for power, as all of the angels are like, well, who's going to be the new god now? Who's going to run creation? Which also happens kind of in the Lucifer comic book series. However, the scramble for who's going to become the next god is not just between the angels. If anything, it's not even between the angels at all. The angels are kind of useless, and this is directly stated in the comic book series, is that they exist just to follow orders, and if no one is giving them orders, they don't really know what to do. And that might be why they have such a dislike for Lucifer, because Lucifer is so strong-willed and does believe in free will, and that disturbs and upsets them because that goes against every single thing that they are. Also in the TV show, even though God is no longer in the universe, nothing is really falling apart, at least to the same degree that it's falling apart in the comic book series. But the comic book series also includes every other mythology, and so part of the reason everything is falling apart is that news gets around that God has left. And so now not only is there a scramble for power, not only between the host of heaven, but every single divine being is trying to become the new God and sit in the prima mobile, and become the new God of creation. But also Fenris, the wolf from Norse mythology, sees that God has left, and he's like, oh, now is my time to start the apocalypse. So he begins Norse mythology's apocalypse. And so not only do they have to figure out who's going to replace God, but now they're like, we need to stop this man from actually ending the universe now. But no, how they characterize God is very different. He's more of a bumbling old man who's like really just trying his hardest and really cares about his sons. And later goes on to like be with his wife and just leaves. In the comic book series, he's kind of a dick. You know, Michael and Lucifer decide to talk to him and ask him like, what the fuck is going on? And he's like, oh yes, everything. I planned all of this, even your rebellion, even you are going to hell, even you're creating a new universe, are all things that I planned. You're quitting hell, you're all of this, Lux. I foresaw all of this because I created you to do this thing. I gave you the strong will because I wanted to see what you would do. I gave you the ability to, I gave Michael the ability to create a new universe because I wanted to see what was going to happen. And eventually I'm preparing you guys to take my place when I leave. And then he leaves. And Lucifer and Michael don't take over, and that is what causes the problems, is because Lucifer is like, we need to take over, and Michael said, no, I'm going to go throw a tantrum and not do it. And then problems ensue. But then later we do see like a tangible God figure talking to other people like Lilith and Elaine. And basically, even though he left the universe, God is like, I want to decide whether I should destroy creation or not. And of course, Elaine's like, you can't just destroy creation. That's so many people are going to die. He said, no. If I unmake it, they would never have existed. So what if I just started from scratch? Like, he is very similar to Lucifer in the regard of like, has very little care for mortal life and for the lives of others outside of what he's doing and outside of his games and his plans. And yeah, it really just, and I don't think that portrayal of God would have gone over so well in such like a widely received format like Lucifer, the TV show, was. And that is why they couldn't have portrayed him in this kind of darker way. Also because the tone of the TV show just was not as dark. It was not as serious and grave as these comic books are. So it just would not have worked as well. Because it's a rom-com, and half that com is comedy. So... And Lucifer, the comic book series, is definitely not a comedy, even though there are some comedic characters like Gaudium, who's a fallen cherub. I actually love that man. And then later he meets Lucifer in the void once, the universe is restarted and Elaine's the new god. Lucifer decides to just like leave the universe and be in the void. He hasn't even decided to want to create a new universe anymore. He just wants to be in the void and just like be in nothingness. And God is there because obviously God loved the universe and there's only one void you can go into. And he tries to get Lucifer to see from his perspective, and he wants to see from Lucifer's perspective, and Lucifer just says, no, fuck off. I don't want to see you ever again. There's nothing you can say that will make me ever want to forgive you or be like you or interact with you ever again. And that's that. And that's how they part ways. And I think... that's another thing that would have been hard to translate to TV, is that the Lucifer comic book series doesn't have a happy ending. If anything, it's just a different form of the same shittiness that the world started with. it's just different now, but no one's happier, nothing is really resolved. Things just keep going the way that things have always gone. And eventually this whole event will be forgotten to time eons in the future. And I don't think that's something that people can readily handle in that format. So those are my thoughts on the Lucifer comic book series and the TV show. Please let me know what you think in the comments below. And if there's anything you want to hear me talk about next week, or any questions that you have, please comment below too. I love hearing from you guys. That being said, I hope you have a great winter and a very happy Hanukkah. So long and thanks for all the fish. Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.